Thank you all for joining us this morning. There's still a few people coming in, but great to see the good turnout. I'm Ingrid Kool-Clarke, Partner and Creative Director at Lippincott. We're a global brand, marketing and experience consultancy based here in Sydney and across the globe. Since the 40s, we've been helping companies tackle their most complex brand challenges. And along the way, we've been really fortunate to partner with iconic brands such as Starbucks, Korean Air and Nokia. All brands with rich histories that have successfully expanded on the global stage. Fittingly, today's session is all about building and sustaining powerful brands internationally, but not just any brands. It's 3 uniquely Australian brands, each with a growing global footprint. So, who have we got? Joining me today, we have Joel Moran. He's the International Vice President of Marketing at Afterpay. We have Ben Grindlay, Chief Marketing Officer at Adelaide University. And then finally, we've got Roddy Campbell, Director of Partnerships and International Business at Tennis Australia. So together today, we're going to explore some of the challenges and opportunities that Australian brands face, whether that's navigating cultural nuances, diverse consumer behaviours abroad, or harnessing the authentic power of brand Australia in storytelling and customer experiences. Let's get into it. So let's start by a bit of context and scene setting for our audience. Ben, can you talk to us about your brand's place globally today, the key markets you're looking at for growth, and some of the challenges that you've experienced in the process?
Thanks, Ingrid, and good morning, everyone. Adelaide University is a bit of a paradox. We're brand new as of 2026, but we're also 180 years of history. So it's the coming together of the University of Adelaide, and which is the 3rd oldest university in Australia, Sandstone Institution, top 100, and the University of South Australia, which is about 30 years old, and quite an entrepreneurial, vocational, innovative institution. So it is quite a big deal in the higher education sector generally, and for us, it is really about being able to compete as a global brand. And that's presented, of course, some wonderful opportunities to launch into some of our existing markets with a compelling offer and a real comprehensive and differentiated Group of 8 institution. But there's also a lot of challenges in that. There are, with institutions, you've got to ensure that when you're recruiting, particularly from some of our key global markets in Asia, across Europe and the Middle East, that there's a credibility in what we're doing. And to be a new institution in that space is tricky. So we're having to tell that story of we're not starting from scratch, but we're an institution that's starting from strength. So I guess at a top level, Ingrid, that's kind of our context at the moment. So there's some wonderful opportunity to launch into these markets, but we're really having to do that as a new brand where sort of credibility, heritage, history really matters for a lot of the markets that we're entering into.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Roddy, are you able to give us a bit of context on your journey so far into global domination?
Not quite there yet. Slightly very different business, but the Australian Open, as I'm sure many are aware, is one of the 4 Grand Slams of the world. But unlike the others, we don't have a huge metropolis like Manhattan or Paris on our doorstep. So we have to work pretty hard to get our brand out there and be relevant around the world. We are truly global. If you just look at where our content is consumed, 85% of the broadcast is offshore outside of Australia, and when you add in social content, it's 95% really. So we're not really an Australian business. We just take place in Melbourne, but our audience is around the world. Our business is more or less 3 revenue streams. There is ticketing and hospitality, sponsorship, and media rights. So when you break it down, 2 out of 3 of those are driven by international. So we really need to spend as much time as we can in the markets outside of Australia that are driving that consumption, which ultimately translates to revenue for us. And it's been a bit of a journey. We're more global now than we've ever been. It's challenging to get out there from Melbourne. We're a long way from everywhere, but just to try and show up in those key markets that are going to make the difference. And and drive, relevant campaigns that are going to resonate doesn't always work. But we've captured a few learnings to sort of fine tune our approach in the next few years.
Thanks, Roddy. Joel, can you tell us a little bit about Afterpay and the journey so far?
Sure. So personally, I've been working with Afterpay for 5 years, and as many may know, we were founded right here in Sydney, just over 10 years ago. Since then, we have expanded to the US, Canada, the UK, and we're in New Zealand, of course. And a little bit more recently, 2022, we were acquired by Block. So we became actually an American company, and we have other brands, Square and Cash App, who are a huge banking app in the US. So I think the key thing for us is that when we were first founded, it was all about our brand promise of creating like fairer financial products that challenge the status quo and help create like a world where everybody can win, really. And that means not only our consumers, but especially our merchant partners and society kind of at large. So I would say that in moving to different countries or expanding into different countries, and even with Block, it's about making sure that brand promise is true no matter where we go. In terms of our unique challenges, our business model is a two-sided network. So we have the merchants who are our customers, and we have our consumers. So when we go into a new market, it's actually first and foremost about getting our merchants on board and helping them to grow their businesses, and at the same time developing our consumer base and nurturing that consumer base. And this is all in the backdrop of every country having very unique situation, different competitors, different regulations, different merchants. So that all has to be taken very much into consideration, which is why every country is actually at quite a different phase of their journey.
That's a good segue, because I wanted to ask a little bit about the sort of nuances culturally and consumer behaviors across different markets. And I think if you're comfortable, I'll leave this one with you as well, Joel. But you mentioned, and of course a lot of us know this already, but Afterpay was the pioneer in the buy now and pay later market in Australia. Yet you said this, the concept was quite well established in other markets. So I think the question really is, how have you navigated that difference? And how might it affect consumer behavior, and does it change some of the challenges that your customers are trying to solve for?
I think that no matter what country that we go into, we have entered it with a very similar or the same brand promise and a similar value proposition, and yet we have actually expanded that somewhat over time. So I think it's definitely been about working with our merchant partners and then developing our product and going to market with something that meets the brand promise in a similar way. But as you have pointed out, we actually have some kind of stark differences. Like in the UK, we're actually not called Afterpay, we're called ClearPay, for instance, which is like one key difference. But what remains true is like a lot of things about the brand, how it looks and feels, the imagery, a lot of the product, and the promise and delivery. But we definitely try and use global platforms, global campaigns at times, and playbooks, but customize and target those to individual regions and audiences considerably.
Yeah, I mean, that's a necessity, I guess. Ben, it's funny, I have a 150-year milestone here, but you said 180.
I was being kind and adding the University of South Australia.
Okay. I was like, wow, I mean, that's amazing. But I think what's interesting is the fact that the University of Adelaide has just celebrated that milestone. Alongst the announcement of the merger, like you mentioned with UniSA. How have you brought local communities along with you while still attracting that global audience? You did touch on this slightly, but it's more about that kind of local community and how you brought everyone together.
Yeah, such a great question. And I think I got a lot more grey hairs during that period. I don't know, for any of you in the room, if you can imagine that you are just about to launch the merger of two and one particularly iconic institution in the state. It's the largest employer. Higher education is the biggest export in South Australia. And at the same time that you're doing that and the state government is really behind it and pushing it, you've got 150 years of the third oldest university and celebrating that with generations, and the University of South Australia really being, University of Adelaide really being part of the community rather than being a part of it. So all of this pressure on how do you enjoy and celebrate this 150 years while telling your community that it's coming, in their view, that it's coming to an end. So that was stressful, if I'm really honest, to, on the one hand, have this calendar of events and true celebration and reflecting on everything that we've done, from the first university to admit women to the first university to put someone in space from Australia, was just, there's so much in that. So it was difficult, but the way that we did it was really to try and bring people with us on that journey, to be really honest and transparent with our communities, to be really clear about that this wasn't an end, but it was kind of a new beginning in what we needed to do, and that the university isn't a logo or a tagline or what we're doing. It is sort of part of the fabric of the state, and that sort of legacy will continue. Honestly, a lot of alumni weren't thrilled with it. There's a sense of their brand being messed with and their sort of history. But I think we handled that quite well. We were quite evidence-based and led in what we did. We tried to really listen and be very transparent with those communities that we engaged with, and to tell a little bit of a story about where we were going and why, and what it looked like to be an anchor institution for the state, that we really wanted to bring Adelaide to the world and the world to Adelaide. And that was part of, hopefully, the state's prosperity and things like that. So it was very difficult to authentically celebrate that 150 years, which I think we did. And at the same time, in the middle of that celebration, launch a new brand, as we needed to build a pipeline of international students coming through to the States. So yeah, it was stressful. And caffeine and stress kept me trim. It was great.
Yeah. And you're opening your doors January 26, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah,
So we kick off January 2026, but we've had to be in market for a couple of years now, really because just of that time frame of not only recruiting international students, but also domestic students, our research partnerships, all of those things matter. So we've, it's sort of had to wear multiple hats for a period, which has been...
you did it.
I think so.
Behind you now.
Yeah.
Roddy, you mentioned the brand campaign hits different. Australian Open's brand campaign hits different. You said it resonated quite well in some markets, but not all. Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned from that experience and the ultimate solve?
Sure. Hopefully you've seen the campaign hits different. We actually went on sale for the AO last week. So usually a tennis tournament will change its tagline every year. So we worked with BMF on this positioning, hits different 3 years ago, which has really worked. And the marketing team has evolved that campaign on different levels. And it's just gone live in Australia. It really encapsulates what the AO is about. You have to go and see it. It's not just tennis. It's quite disruptive. There's music, there's tech, there's food. It's got a bit of everything. And so that's really, those two words really encapsulate what we're all about. So that the agency tender was a shoe-in as soon as we heard that phrase, because that is nailing it. Now, does that translate to every language? Not at all. It's obviously a bit of a colloquialism, a kind of Gen Z phrase that has got momentum here, but it doesn't mean anything in Japan or Germany or China. So we loved the campaign, but we had to tweak it. We're lucky we've got broadcasters where we've got some content that we create together, so we could test and learn without big media spends in key markets. So we kind of evolved it. There was lots of imagery that was the same, but we maybe changed the words, so there is a near equivalent in some of those key markets. There's probably about 50% of the markets carried hits different, and 50% of them had their own phrase, which was something similar. So in terms of how we got through that, it was a bit of test and learn, but I think it's also less and less about one hero campaign in marketing these days. So that influencers, as I'm sure a lot of you guys are experimenting with having human voices tell your brand story. So that's been really effective for us to adapt that brand campaign. So we have a set of assets and a positioning that we encourage, KOLs in key markets to pick up and run with in their own style. So that's cut through pretty well. So I guess it's a bit of a symphony, really, of activity. So there is a hero campaign, but there is broadcaster content, there is micro and macro influencers, there's brand partners doing their own thing in the region. So the CMO's job is kind of less about shouting with a hero campaign and more about, coordinating all of that activity and fueling the fire, really. So we're kind of having to be pretty reactive and have lots of different types of assets, whether it's match footage or collaborating with Australian influencers or Visit Victoria imagery. So we've got a toolkit which we're quite nimble in feeding different markets, so they can tell it on those channels. So it's a smorgasbord of activity that we're trying to be as make it less chaotic and a bit more choreographed in how we work with each of the different markets.
But I guess it's all stemmed from the concept that AO is a different experience, right? Hits different, and that kind of carries through everything. Like the phrase "hits different" is what didn't necessarily land in those other markets.
Yeah,
but the concept.
Yeah, some markets are more focused on tennis, like tennis purists that don't necessarily care about the Aperol bar and all the other, and having a 1-point slam. And so we have to, we don't want to isolate the traditional audience that wants to go and see the best tennis players in the world. So yeah, certain markets are a bit pure tennis, so we're a bit more player imagery and a bit less people having fun in that market. Whereas when we're trying to sell it as a bucket list holiday that's worthwhile coming to Australia for, we dial up some of the beaches, even though the beaches are pretty rubbish in Melbourne. I just moved from Sydney. We try and just tell the whole story of what it would mean as a holiday.
So I have to acknowledge, looking around, we have 3 white men and me as well as a white Australian on stage. So I want to ask the group, maybe you can kick off, Joel, moving into global markets, how do you prioritize inclusiveness and create a diversity in your brand identity as you expand?
Good question and good observation. I think, first of all, I have loved being here at South by Southwest and seeing the amazing diversity that we have across all the different panels, which is awesome. I think that personally and for our organization, having diversity in our company is really important, and everywhere's got like a way to go, but I think we're doing a relatively good job at it. I think for me, I run a pretty small marketing team, and we run marketing for Australia, New Zealand, UK, and Canada. US is run a little bit differently from the US. And I think that more importantly than recruiting, arguably, for nationality and gender is actually about having like a global mindset and perspective and like a global thought. And I think that doesn't necessarily come with like all marketers, particularly if you've maybe marketed mostly locally. And I am still on a journey with that myself. And I think that like leads me to the only way that you can actually truly get that is possibly like exploring yourself and observing, but also, of course, listening and talking to the customers. Sure. In our organization, we have a very significant focus on insights and research. We've got a fantastic insights and research team. So, when you're trying to be an efficient marketer, create, say, like creative platforms that are going to work fairly well across different regions, we're always obsessed with researching it within the market as much as reasonable. And I'll tell you what, like 9 times out of 10, I reckon I see a piece of, an insight that comes out and I'm like, I would never have thought of that. I would never have thought that a person in this country that's like from this background, in this town, in this country, would have read it and actually thought it said this, when in my mind, I thought it said that. And so I think that, as you do that more and more often personally, and your team and the organization increases its like global kind of mindset and awareness. But I think you just can never be more obsessed with the customer through those types of things to hit the mark right.
Yeah, exactly. Roddy, can you talk to us a little bit about
that inclusiveness and how to create that diverse brand identity with the work you're doing?
Sure. It's a core part of our DNA as
Yeah.
like Joel. We're trying to be the most inclusive sporting event in the world. So the AO has First Nations Day, Pride Day, various all abilities pathways. Like we want everyone to be able to experience our brand. And so that is part of the story we're trying to tell on a global stage. So just the actual communication of our value proposition carries a message of diversity in it. And I think what we're here talking about today, globalization and regional, like when we're in a different market, and yes, I'm a white male, middle-aged, just about hanging on to it.
Tell us
But
more.
I'm probably in the minority in the teams, obviously, we're dealing with in the regions and the partners there.
Yeah.
So, you know, the team in China is young Chinese women that are driving the business there. So I think just being really respectful and curious about the cultures you're doing business with is key. So echoing what Joel said, if you don't have that global mindset, it's gonna be a bit more clunky when you're doing this sort of business. So you assume nothing, you ask questions, you try and research before you go to these markets. So I think that is a good way of demonstrating that the principles of diversity and inclusion that we want to learn and we want to embrace your culture. So in all of my teams that travel around the world, like we try and really educate ourselves on the cultural norms and all that sort of stuff, and that seems to flow better.
Yeah, and Joel and I were talking about this earlier today, but actually being in location and absorbing culture and understanding and being on the ground, I think is particularly important. Yeah. Ben?
Yeah, other than probably accepting more than I definitely am deep in middle age. But look, I think.
In old age, doesn't it?
Yeah, oh, right. So I thought, like, good on you for. Yeah, I think for a university, it really is baked in with those expectations. But I do want to reflect. You know, I think we have about our staff profile across the university, 150 different countries sort of represented, and it is deliberately in that way. And I think for even our marketing team, we have people in the different countries embedded there and often coming back. So I think, a lot of the time we do sort of get that right, but it's definitely something where, in terms of what Joel was saying about sort of the evidence and turning up, I think sometimes how we interpret that and perhaps the lenses that we put on it, we don't always get right. And sometimes it spins the other way where I think we're trying to overthink it and just really need to be relying more on, it might be the diversity across the team and really respecting that rather than kind of, oh, we should be doing this or we should be doing that. So I think it's almost like we're trying to recalibrate that and be a lot, I think just a lot more accurate in how we represent sort of our diversity and things like that rather than performative.
Yeah, actions speak louder than words.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
For sure.
So moving the conversation to more of Brand Australia and how it plays a role in storytelling. Roddy, it'd be really interesting to hear from you the Australian Open status. You sort of touched on this and the fact that majority of the work is offshore. But as your status is a world-class event and a travel destination, how would you tailor your storytelling to approach those various markets that you listed?
Just to recap what I said, influencers is a big part of it. So in every market, we will try and find between 10 and 50 influencers that will maybe join the AO, and that's maybe working with a broadcaster or with TikTok or doing it ourselves. So that's definitely one tool we've used. And then we go and do events in local markets as well. But it is, depending on the market, so the US, the West Coast of the US is a really important market for us. Like Americans love their tennis. There's a lot of money in Silicon Valley and California and LA at the moment. So, us showing up at Palm Springs or San Francisco doing kind of travel marketing effectively. So we dial up Australiana there, like Americans love the Crocodile Dundee sort of vibe. So we definitely play on that a little bit with the way we communicate. There's a real fondness for Australia. So whereas in China, which is our biggest overall market, where 40% of our audience is, we really have to take the AO to them. It's less about Australiana. They want to feel like it's the China Open in a way. So we turn up and create events in their market. There's amateur tournaments that run all year round with the AO brand. So it's called the AO, but it almost feels Asia Pacific Slam, and it's got a real Asian feel to it, and that has worked because it's drawn investment from partners in the region that want to partner with a big APAC based event rather than Australia. So one is about drawing people in with Australian messaging, and one is making it feel Asian. So they're the two kind of biggest markets as an example.
That's super interesting. Do you use, like you said, it's still called Australian Open, but do you sort of use a slightly different like message? And
Yeah. We probably
identity in that
AO
sense?
is the brand, so we've
Yeah.
shortened it to AO, which I think is getting
Asian
pretty
Open.
mass recognition now. So that logo is very consistent and
Of course.
recognisable. So very rarely do we say the Australian Open these days.
Yeah, right. That's fascinating.
If we haven't done our job, if you have to say it.
Joel, are there specific international markets or groups where the Australian roots really do benefit?
Yeah, I think it's interesting in speaking to this group over breakfast. I think we're actually very different in the benefit that having Australian roots has for fintech. I think for fintech, there's some awesome Australian companies that have come out, like Airwallex and WiseTech, are a couple that kind of come to mind. Because I think we're known as creating products and services that are really innovative and really trustworthy as well, and that's a real benefit. But I think from a consumer point of view, when it comes to financial products, they actually want you to feel local, like you're built for them, that you've got a team there, that it's appropriate for them. Like when it comes to regulatory and regulators in particular, like you have to, have relationships with them and feel like, you have to have a setup, and like there's a lot of things that you actually have to do that's local. So I think for us, the flag doesn't really travel, as much. It's actually more about ensuring that, all of our customers, including our merchants especially, feel like we're more local.
Yeah, and I guess how, from a consumer's perspective, would they care that it's Australian? It's more, are you trustworthy? Do you work? How's it going to benefit me?
Yeah, that's exactly what they're more interested in,
Yeah.
and feel like them, like it's a brand that's actually for them, that's been created for them. It's probably better, like for instance in New Zealand, we're by far and away the biggest buy now pay later brand, and New Zealanders they don't want to feel like it's an Australian company even that's come over to New Zealand. They want to feel like it's a company that's there. Maybe it's an Australian based company now, an American company, but it actually feels like it's built for them and with them very much in mind, which is the truth, and that's what we want to make sure that the brand shows and demonstrates.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Ben, this is probably a very different, response for you, but how does Brand Australia play a role in your marketing at the university? Because I'm sure it's quite important.
Yeah, it's critical, but I think it's really a lens rather than a label that we take to market. So it is very much about what Australia stands for and the proposition within that, and that does sell really well, but in different markets it can mean different things. So in China, for example, it's all of those things, but it's the rankings and reputation. In the Southeast Asia and South Asia, it might be more about the sort of lifestyle, work-study rights, and sort of safety and those kind of things that come with it. But overall, it really is that Australian lens that we can bring to it. There is something about that a lot of the key markets that we recruit into really value. When we talk about our partnerships and our research activity and things like that, it definitely is. And particularly in Adelaide, it's big enough to have everything that you need, but it's small enough that you have those connections and how you work across multidisciplinary research topics and things like that. It's a very vibrant hub. So at a macro level, Australia talks to that about our size, and then within the Adelaide context, we really try and talk to all the best things about that we're not Sydney, that we're not Melbourne, but that's a good thing in a way. Not there.
Careful.
We also have excellent beaches, but I think that's kind of part of that proposition. Very much is around the lens and not really the label of being Australia.
So does it interchange between Brand Australia and Brand Adelaide? Because of course people are looking to move and work and live in
Yeah.
Adelaide. So is it more like, what's the balance between
Yeah,
both?
it's really interesting. So, and part of our challenge in Adelaide is that, you know, for a lot of the markets, everyone has heard of Melbourne and Sydney, but not so much Adelaide, or it might be just Adelaide Oval or the Great Shiraz that we have. So there's sort of that destination work that we need to do. So we work really closely with Study Adelaide and with our tourism as well to kind of build that in. A lot of the tourism dollar that comes into South Australia is because of education as well. So that is, that is a part that we do. So we very much want to leverage that. We are Brand Australia, but we do need to be a little bit quirky and a little bit different to try and get that cut through.
So moving more the conversation to managing global brands, I think, Joel, would be really interesting. You mentioned before that you have Cash App, Afterpay in the US, ClearPay in the UK, quite a variety. How do you ensure brand cohesion and manage your portfolio despite those differences?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's definitely a challenge because there's a lot of efficiencies from keeping things similar, and things have gotten kind of quite different across all the different countries. One thing is, for starters, ClearPay in the UK. It's a different name, but basically everything else is similar from like a brand identity point of view. The logo is basically the same, the color's the same. Like a lot of things are actually the same about it. I'd say where the stark difference is nowadays is in the US, because some may or may not know, but a little bit about Cash App. They have 60 million customers using them monthly, so double, like 2 times Australia's population. And one of the biggest advantages of Afterpay joining Block was actually the opportunity to, join those value propositions together with the ecosystem. So around, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, we allowed all Cash App customers to have access to the Afterpay product within the broader like Cash App banking app service. So there's still a standalone product, but now it's actually offered to those almost 60 million customers that they have there, which has obviously increased our customer base and the merchant value proposition as well, because they have access to a whole bunch of extra customers. And with that, we made a lot of changes to the brand there. For instance, if you know our brand, you see it's like the Bondi Minty color, but in the US, it's now Cash App green, like the lanyards, basically, about that color. So, it is actually getting a little bit more like divergent, I suppose, in the US, whereas in other countries, we keep it the same. But what is the red thread still, I must say, is, like the brand promise and our like company mission through all of our products and services. And I think, keeping that the same is like the most fundamental thing.
And is that Block that's kind of coming down through across the portfolio, or is it quite, what's the word, segmented?
I think that the reason why Block chose to acquire Afterpay is because the values already matched in the first place.
Okay.
Like both had, in slightly different words, a mission about economic empowerment and creating financial products that help, improve the world in a way. So I think that just naturally actually was similar. Our CEO is Jack Dorsey, who co-founded Twitter, for instance. So he's just like an absolute innovator. And as well as, the brands that we kind of know, there's a lot of other things that our organization does that changes the world in a positive way, like whether it be around like Bitcoin and all the like tools and things that are being created there, or you might have heard of Tidal, this
Yes.
music streaming service, which is like the Ferrari of music, which is actually all about, it's not the same as Spotify at all. It's about, it's about being for musicians and the music industry, actually. We have Jay-Z as our board member, who we heard from at our conference. So, and he's just a game changer. So I think like there's a genuine likeness about what we are out there to do. We were talking about the fact that, maybe we're still myth busting it, to be honest. We still cop a bit of flack, but we stand like with pride about what we offer people, and that it's a better alternative to traditional credit still.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I'm conscious of the time. I think for the audience, it'd be really great to hear some advice. Maybe Ben, you could give us some advice on any other Australian brands that might be in the room that are looking to go global. Do you have any words of wisdom?
Yeah, no pressure. Look, I think, from our perspective, it's been sort of a unique journey because in some ways we were already a global brand, but then sort of through the merger, sort of resetting. I think, from our perspective, it's been very much about ensuring that in our local space that we really knew what we stood for, that there was sort of that buy-in and purpose, and that when we were going into the global market, that it was credible. But also ensuring that we had a very global outlook. So if you look at our category, particularly for the older institutions, there's a lot of crests and a lot of Latin. So to move away from that was challenging for our communities. But the reason we did that was that we really did look across the globe and what do contemporary universities look like internationally, and not many of them have a crest and not many of them have Latin. And if you want to go into those markets that we were looking to grow and to partner in, we really had to take that leap of faith. And to do that with the communities that we serve in South Australia had to be highly credible, had to have a lot of evidence around that, because we were taking an iconic 150-year-old brand and completely changing it. So being able to talk confidently about that, being able to have the evidence and the story about why we were doing that and where we were looking to compete, and to be sort of a contemporary but a storied brand in what we did was really important. So I think the lesson that I would say is knowing where you're coming from and where you sit as a brand was really important, but then being bold enough to understand that if you do really want to compete globally, that you're going to have to leave some of that behind and really position yourself in a space that attracts and sits alongside the kind of brands and the markets that you want to.
And ultimately, you've only got one chance, right? So you may as well go big or go home.
Yeah, I think, you could have done it safe, but I think, then you're not really fulfilling that promise. And that promise for us was to be a differentiated group of 8 university. And we do get that chance. Like, I think a lot of other brands would love to leave a lot of that behind. It's a very double-edged sword to be a historic and traditional institution. That's great, but also you're seen as staid and stuffy. And to be able to hopefully have all the benefits of sandstones and jacaranda trees and all that kind of stuff, but have a really contemporary pedagogy and a really a critical and exciting way that we're looking to engage with these markets will set us on a good path.
Yeah, it's exciting. Good luck.
Thanks, mate.
Roddy, could you give the audience some advice on any brands preparing to go global?
Yeah, I guess not many brands would have an international sporting event. Hard to relate to, I guess, but maybe a few common stories and learnings that we've had. I think the first is about persistence. So we launched an office in China 9 years ago. So 4 or 5 salaries, a couple of retained agencies, like everyone was, questioning the decision, like there's no return for the first 3 or 4 years, and it felt like a long slog. But now, 9 years later, we have 7 or 8 partners from the region, really viable business. We've grown the team. We've become culturally relevant. 40% of people say it's their favourite Grand Slam. So it's paid off, but it took over 5 years for the first real signals of return to come. So I think, you'll get pressure about the return almost immediately in the current environment. But, there are some lessons of it will pay off in the long run, and trying to find those indicators that are maybe not cash coming back directly, but shows you're on the right path. And the other one is simplicity. I think complexity can be a bit of a silent killer to a strategy. So not every sub-brand is going to work. Not every project is going to travel. Not every market is worth exploring. So trying to find the data points to really help you navigate and prioritize which projects in which markets you would launch with. So that's, we've gone and done big launches in India that cost a lot of money that didn't pay off, and we need to approach it differently. And so, just trying to, half the battle is choosing not what not to do, I guess.
Yeah, being really thorough before you jump in and... Yeah, that makes sense.
That's
It's simple, but...
Abraham Lincoln quote, or whatever it was, about sharpening your axe. spend more time that than the actual chopping.
Yeah, right. Yeah, being laser focused. And finally, Joel, any not questions, any advice for brands looking to go global from your experience?
I'd say from a technology product standpoint, it might seem like it's a quick win. It's easy to go global, or to go into even a new market, especially with all the different technologies and AIs and things that you can use. So it's like, yeah, let's just like do it. But I think that you have to think really carefully about whether you're going to be able to offer the same or acceptable like customer experience to deliver on whatever it is the customer problem that you're trying to solve is, rather than rushing into it, because there can be a couple of problems. One, you can not be able to do it after all because you haven't researched and there's like a problem that you didn't anticipate, like maybe the customer need, the product market fit isn't actually there in the way that you thought that it was, or there's regulations or things that you hadn't considered. Or the other thing that can happen is you actually end up trading off the experience that you're giving to your Australian or whatever markets that you're currently in, because you have to move entrepreneurship or resources or things like that to other places. So I guess I'd just say, don't take shortcuts, do your due diligence and make really thoughtful, like pragmatic decisions so that you get it right first go and minimize your risk of actually having to pull back out.
Well, I'm conscious of the time. I think that should be it. I'm sure a lot of you have a lot of sessions to go to. We don't have a Q&A session, but I'm going to throw you guys under the bus. If anyone wants to come up and talk to Ben, Roddy, or Joel, please do if you have any questions. Thank you all for your time, and thanks to the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.